Mike Tyson was standing in his bedroom at 3 a.m., staring at a 500-pound Bengal tiger sleeping on his custom-made bed. The most dangerous man on the planet was crying because he finally understood something. He and that tiger were the same. Both of them were wild things pretending to be tame. Both of them were trapped in golden cages. What happened over the next 3 years between Tyson and his tigers would reveal more about the heavyweight champion than any fight ever could. It was 1990, and Mike Tyson had everything. A $4 million mansion in Southington, Ohio, 28 luxury cars, millions in the bank. The heavyweight championship of the world. Fame so big he couldn't walk down a street without causing a riot. And he'd never been more alone in his life. Costa D'Amato had been dead for 5 years. The old man who'd turned a broken kid from Brooklyn into a champion, who'd given Tyson purpose and direction and love. Gone. And without Cus, Tyson was lost. He'd won the title at 20, become the youngest heavyweight champion in history, just like Cus said he would. But Cus wasn't there to see it, wasn't there to guide him through what came after. And what came after was chaos. Don King had his hooks in deep now, controlling Tyson's career, his money, his life. Robin Givens had married him, destroyed him publicly, divorced him, and taken everything she could. The press called him a monster, a thug, an animal. So Tyson decided to get an animal. "I want a tiger," Tyson told his assistant one day, like he was ordering a pizza. "A what?" "A Bengal tiger, a big one. I want to look at something more dangerous than me." His assistant thought he was joking, but Mike Tyson never joked about things like that. 3 weeks later, a truck pulled up to Tyson's mansion, with 3 Bengal tiger cubs inside. They cost $70,000 each, plus another $4,000 a month in food and care. Tyson named them Kenya, Storm and Boris. He built them custom enclosures on his property, brought in trainers, had a 24-hour security team watching them. But here's the thing about Mike Tyson, he didn't want the tigers for status. He didn't want them to show off, to prove he was rich and crazy. He wanted them because when he looked at those tigers, he saw himself caged, beautiful and deadly, and completely alone. The first time Tyson went into the enclosure with Kenya, a 400-pound female with orange and black stripes that seemed to ripple when she moved, his trainers tried to stop him. "Mike, you can't just walk in there, these are wild animals." "So am I," Tyson said, and opened the gate. He walked into that enclosure slow, hands at his sides, no fear. Kenya was lying in the sun, and when she saw Tyson, she raised her massive head and stared at him with those yellow gold eyes that could see right through pretense, right through bullshit, right through fame. Tyson sat down about 10 feet away from her, didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there. The trainers were panicking outside the fence. One of them had a tranquilizer rifle ready, but Tyson raised his hand, signaling them to wait. For 20 minutes, Tyson and Kenya just looked at each other. Then Kenya stood up, stretched all muscle and grace and power, and walked toward Tyson. The trainers held their breath. This was how people died. This was how a 400-pound predator reminded you that you were meat. But Kenya didn't attack. She walked right up to Tyson, pressed her massive head against his chest, and started making this deep rumbling sound. Not a growl, a purr. Tyson put his hand on her head, felt the heat of her, the strength, and something broke inside him. He started crying, right there, sitting on the ground, with a Bengal tiger pressed against his chest. Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, cried like a child. "I know how you feel," he whispered to Kenya. "I know exactly how you feel." The trainers watching didn't understand what they were seeing. They thought Tyson was crazy, reckless, suicidal, but what they were actually watching was 2 caged animals recognizing each other. Over the next 3 years, Tyson spent more time with his tigers than with humans. He'd wake up at 2 a.m. Insomnia was a constant now, had been since Cus died, and walk out to the enclosures. Sometimes he'd just sit outside the fence and watch them sleep. Other times, he'd go inside and lie down next to Kenya, feeling the heat of her body, listening to her breathe. "They don't judge me," Tyson told his friend Anthony Pitts one night. "They don't care about the belt. They don't care about the money. They don't care that I'm famous. They just see me. Mike, they're tigers. They don't see nothing. They're animals." "No," Tyson said, his voice hard. "We're the animals. They're free inside. We're the ones pretending to be something we're not." Pitts didn't understand. Nobody did. But Tyson knew. He knew that every time he walked into a room full of people, managers, promoters, reporters, fans, he had to put on a mask, had to be Mike Tyson, the destroyer, Iron Mike, the baddest man on the planet, had to play the role that Kos had created, that Don King was exploiting, that the world demanded. But when he was with Kenya, with Storm, with Boris, he didn't have to be anything except himself. And himself was tired, scared, angry, lost. The mansion in Ohio was massive, 52,000 square feet of marble and gold and emptiness. Tyson would walk through those rooms at night and feel like he was in a tomb. All this space, all this luxury, and he was more trapped than when he'd been locked up in the Tryon School for Boys as a kid. At least in Tryon, he knew he was in prison. But here he was supposed to be free, supposed to be living the dream. But it felt like death. The tigers were in enclosures, custom built, temperature controlled, better than most people's homes. But they were still cages. And Tyson would stand there watching Kenya pace back and forth, and he'd think, that's me, that's exactly me. Going through the motions, pretending this is freedom, but knowing, always knowing, that we're trapped. There was one night, about a year after he got the tigers, when everything crystallized for Tyson. He was in his bedroom, this obscenely huge room, with a custom bed that cost more than most people made in a year, and he couldn't sleep. The rage was building inside him like pressure in a boiler. All the things he couldn't say, all the things he couldn't be, all the ways he was being used. Don King was stealing from him. Everyone knew it, but Tyson couldn't do anything about it, because King had him locked into contracts that gave King control over everything. King was making millions off Tyson's blood, and Tyson was just letting it happen. Why do I let this happen? Tyson said out loud to his empty room. Why don't I just kill him? Because he was scared, not of King, not of anyone, but of himself, of what he was capable of. Kos used to tell him, you're a killer, Mike. That's what makes you great in the ring. But outside the ring, you have to control it. You have to cage the beast. But what happens when you cage something wild for too long? What happens when you force a predator to pretend it's tame? It destroys itself. Tyson got out of bed and walked downstairs, through the mansion, out to the tiger enclosures. It was 3 a.m., November, cold. He was wearing just sweatpants and no shirt, and he could see his breath in the air. Kenya was awake, pacing. She saw Tyson and stopped, made that deep chuffing sound tigers make when they recognize someone. Tyson opened the gate and went inside. His security team, monitoring the cameras, started freaking out. This was against every protocol. No one was supposed to be in with the tigers without trainers present. But Tyson didn't care. He needed to be close to something that understood. Kenya walked up to him, pressed her head against his chest again. That had become their thing, and Tyson put his arms around her massive neck and just held on. We're the same, you and me, Tyson whispered into her fur. They got us both locked up. They dress it up nice. Call it luxury. Call it being taken care of. But we're prisoners, both of us. Kenya made that rumbling purr sound. You know what's funny? Tyson continued, tears running down his face now. They call me an animal. The press, the people, they say I'm dangerous, I'm violent, I'm a beast, and they're right. I am. But you know what? I never chose this. Kos made me into this, and now I don't know how to be anything else. He pulled back, looked into Kenya's eyes, those yellow gold eyes that held no judgment, no expectation, no demand for performance. You ever feel like the whole world wants to see you destroy something? Tyson asked her, like that's all you're good for, like that's your only purpose. Kenya just stared at him. That's what I am, a destroyer. I destroy people in the ring. I destroyed my marriage. I'm destroying myself. And everyone just watches. They buy tickets to watch me destroy things. But nobody asks if I want to be this way. Nobody asks if I'm tired of destroying. This was it. This was the truth. Tyson couldn't say to anyone else that he was tired of being Mike Tyson, that the weight of being the baddest man on the planet was crushing him, that he wanted to be soft, wanted to be gentle, wanted to be something other than fists and fury, but he didn't know how. Kenya lay down on the ground, and Tyson lay down next to her. The ground was cold, but her body was warm. He rested his head against her side, felt the steady rhythm of her breathing, and for the first time in months, he felt something like peace. You're lucky, he told her quietly. At least people expect you to be dangerous. Nobody's disappointed when a tiger acts like a tiger. But me, when I act like what they made me, they call me an animal. When I try to be gentle, They call me weak, can't win either way. He closed his eyes. The irony wasn't lost on him. The heavyweight champion of the world, the man who'd knocked out 37 opponents, most of them in the first round, was lying on the ground in a tiger enclosure at 3 a.m., crying to a 400-pound predator, because she was the only thing in his life that didn't want something from him. The trainers showed up 20 minutes later, panicked, thinking Tyson had fallen asleep in there and was in danger, but when they saw him lying peacefully next to Kenya, both of them quiet and still, they realized they were witnessing something they couldn't explain. This wasn't reckless, this wasn't crazy, this was two caged animals finding comfort in each other. Word got out, of course. Everything about Tyson's life got out. The tabloids had a field day. Tyson sleeps with tigers. Iron Mike's wild side. Champion's dangerous obsession. They made it sound insane. They made it sound like Tyson was losing his mind, playing with death, tempting fate. They didn't understand that Tyson had already lost his mind, had lost it when Kos died, had lost it when the world turned him into a commodity instead of a person, had lost it when every fight became less about boxing and more about how much money Don King could make. The tigers were the only sane thing in his life. One time, a reporter asked him, "Mike, aren't you afraid those tigers are going to kill you?" Tyson looked at the reporter with those dead eyes that scared people more than his fists ever did. "No," Tyson said, "I'm afraid I'm going to kill them. I'm afraid that one day I'm going to snap, and I'm going to hurt something I love, because that's what I do. I hurt things." The reporter didn't know what to say to that, but it was true. Tyson knew his own capacity for violence, knew that there was something broken inside him, something that Kos had tried to fix by giving him discipline and purpose, but that had come undone when Kos died. The tigers were safe with Tyson, because they were strong enough to survive him. They were the only things in his life he couldn't accidentally destroy. One night, about 2 years into having the tigers, Tyson was at a party at his house. He didn't want to be there. He never wanted to be at these things, but Don King had set it up, some promotional thing, with sponsors and celebrities, and all these fake people pretending to be his friend. Tyson was drinking too much. The rage was building. Some guy, some actor, whose name Tyson didn't remember, was hitting on a woman, wouldn't take no for an answer. Tyson watched it happen, watched this guy put his hand on her, when she clearly didn't want it, watched her try to move away, and something snapped. Tyson walked over, grabbed the guy by his throat, lifted him off the ground. The guy's face went red, then purple. He was choking, dying, and Tyson was watching it happen with no emotion at all. People were screaming, security was running over, but Tyson didn't let go, until he thought of Kenya. He thought of her in that enclosure, thought of how she could kill with one swipe of her paw, but she didn't. She chose not to. Every day, she chose not to. Tyson dropped the guy. He fell to the ground, gasping, crying. Tyson didn't say anything, just walked out of his own party, out to the tiger enclosure. Kenya was asleep, but she woke up when she heard him, came to the fence. "I almost killed him," Tyson said. "I wanted to. God, I wanted to." Kenya made a soft sound. "You're stronger than me," Tyson said. "You could kill me right now if you wanted, but you don't. How do you do that? How do you control it?" The answer, of course, was that Kenya didn't control it. She just was. Tigers don't wrestle with morality. They don't question their nature. They exist in perfect balance between power and restraint. But humans, especially humans like Mike Tyson, don't have that luxury. They're taught to be one thing, and they become it so completely that they can't find their way back to anything else. Tyson kept the tigers for 3 years. In that time, they became the most stable relationship he had, more stable than his marriages, his friendships, his business relationships. The tigers didn't lie, didn't manipulate, didn't want anything except food and space, and to be left alone, just like Tyson. But eventually, like everything else in Tyson's life, it had to end. In 2003, after Tyson had gone to prison, lost his fortune, and lost himself completely, he had to give up the tigers, couldn't afford them anymore, couldn't take care of them. They went to a sanctuary in Colorado, where they'd have more space, better care, a life closer to what they deserved. The day they took Kenya away was one of the worst days of Tyson's life, worse than losing fights, worse than going bankrupt, because Kenya was the last piece of the person he used to be, the last thing that connected him to a time when he still believed he could be something other than a destroyer. He went to say goodbye to her, one last time. She was in the transport cage, sedated for the trip. Tyson put his hand through the bars,
touched her head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you the life you deserved. I'm sorry I kept you in a cage. I know how that feels, and I'm sorry." Kenya's eyes were half closed from the sedative, but she made that rumbling purr one last time, and Tyson finally understood what Kes had been trying to tell him all those years ago. You can't cage a wild thing without destroying it, and trying to cage yourself, trying to force your nature into something acceptable, something safe, something other than what you are, that destroys you too. Years later, after Tyson had gotten sober, after he'd started therapy, after he'd begun the long, painful process of becoming something resembling whole, someone asked him about the tigers. "Do you regret keeping them?" Tyson thought about it for a long time. "Yeah," he finally said. "I regret putting them in cages. They deserve to be free, but I don't regret knowing them. Kenya saved my life. She reminded me that power doesn't have to be violent, that strength can be gentle, that you can be dangerous and still choose not to hurt." He paused. "I just wish I'd learned that lesson before I destroyed everything else." The story of Mike Tyson and his tigers is about more than an eccentric celebrity with exotic pets. It's about a man trying to understand himself through something that couldn't lie to him, about recognizing your own wildness in another creature and realizing you're both prisoners. Kes D'Amato turned Mike Tyson into a weapon, a perfect fighting machine, but weapons don't have feelings, they don't have needs, they don't get tired or sad or lonely, and Tyson was all of those things. The tigers were the only things in his life that let him be weak, let him be scared, let him be something other than Iron Mike, the destroyer, the baddest man on the planet. They let him be human. That's the thing nobody understands. Tyson said in a 20. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy because I had tigers, but I was never more sane than when I was with them. They were the only honest thing in my life. Everything else was a lie. The fame was a lie. The money was a lie. The image was a lie. But Kenya was real. She didn't pretend. She was exactly what she was, and she let me be exactly what I was." "Which is what?" the interviewer asked. Tyson smiled, but it was sad, tired, lost. He said, "I was lost, and she was the only one who sat with me in that lostness, without trying to fix it or exploit it or make money off it. She just was there." Today, Kenya is gone. She lived to be 16 years old, which is old for a Bengal tiger in captivity. When she died, the sanctuary sent Tyson a photo of her. She was lying in the sun, the same way she used to lie in her enclosure at Tyson's mansion all those years ago. Tyson keeps that photo in his wallet. He doesn't show it to people, doesn't talk about it much, but it's there, a reminder of a time when the baddest man on the planet found comfort in a creature more dangerous than himself. Because sometimes the only way to understand your own cage is to see someone else's, and sometimes the only way to forgive yourself for being what you are is to sit with another wild thing and realize we're all just trying to survive in a world that wants to use us, cage us, and profit from our nature. Mike Tyson was a tiger in human form, and Kenya was the mirror that finally showed him what that meant. If this story moved you, share it, because we all have cages, we all have wild parts of ourselves we're taught to hide, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop pretending to be tame and find someone or something that lets you be exactly what you are, even if what you are is dangerous, even if what you are is broken, even if what you are is tired of destroying and just wants to rest. Kenya understood, and for 3 years, that was enough. 20 years after Kenya, Mike Tyson is a different man, sober, reflective, still broken in places, but honest about the cracks. He runs a cannabis business, does podcasts, talks openly about his demon. The rage is still there, it never really leaves, but now he understands it. Now he knows what Kenya was trying to teach him all along. You don't have to act on every instinct. You don't have to destroy just because you can. Tyson talks about those tiger years like they were a dark dream, but also like they were the most honest period of his life. "I was pretending to be human," he said recently, "and Kenya was pretending to be tame. We were both lying, but at least we were lying together." Here's what most people don't understand. We all have cages. Maybe yours isn't a $4 million mansion. Maybe it's a job that's killing you slowly, a relationship that's more prison than partnership, an image you have to maintain that isn't really you. Maybe it's the person everyone expects you to be, and you're so tired of pretending that you'd rather destroy everything than keep playing the role. Tyson found a tiger that understood. What do you have that lets you be? If this story reached you, if you saw yourself in that 3 a.m. breakdown, in that desperate need to be understood, without judgment, do something. Share this story with someone who's trapped in their own golden cage, someone who's pretending to be tame when they're screaming inside, someone who needs permission to admit they're tired of being what everyone demands. Comment below, what's your cage? What's the wild part of yourself you've been taught to hide? You don't have to use your real name, just be honest. Because Tyson taught us that the first step to freedom is admitting you're trapped. And remember, even the baddest man on the planet needed something that let him be weak. Strength isn't about never breaking, it's about finding someone or something that lets you break safely. Kenya's, but what she taught Tyson lives on. You can be dangerous and gentle, powerful and broken, wild and worthy of love, all at once. Subscribe for more untold stories of champions who learnt their greatest lessons outside the ring. Hit the bell, share this video, and maybe, just maybe, start unlocking your own cage. Because we're all tigers pretending to be house cats, and it's time to stop pretending.